Oh man, we already had church today. Only Fran can get the band back together early. So, thank you. Thank you, Fran. And I heard you say that you're going to be back next week, so we're going to hold you to that. No lying, remember? No lying. It is good to have you back. So, this morning I thought we would start with a little TV trivia, okay? So let's see if you can name this television program based on the opening lines. If you ever homesick with a kid or homesick yourself, you might have caught this program on TV. So here it is. What you are about to witness is real. The participants are not actors. They are actual people with a case pending in civil court. Both parties have agreed to drop their claims and have their cases settled here before Judge fill in the blank. It's been many people. In our forum, the People's Court. Very good. You all get an A+ for today. This is where we start this morning. This 9th commandment is interesting in that one way that you can interpret it is within the context of a court of law. It's about bearing witness. And in this context, we can read this commandment as a directive of how people should behave when testifying in court. It is basically why we still ask witnesses to raise their right hand and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Very good. Yeah. This is an interesting commandment because it sort of anticipates the whole set of laws that would grow out of these 10 guiding principles. If you've ever tried to read the first couple books of the Bible, then you'll know that a large part of Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy contain really dry, lengthy sections of legal codes that governed communal life for the Israelites. And within these codes, there's some pretty interesting laws. But underlying this whole system of laws and consequences is the notion of justice. All right? Justice is about establishing the boundaries of our rights, making sure those rights are not violated, and then assessing the damages or meting out the punishment for when those rights are violated. But it is not always clear if and when those rights have been violated. So in order for justice to remain just, a legal system inherently requires some form of judicial system to review cases and claims to decide if the law has been broken or rights have been violated, and if so, what punishment is warranted. And as a society, we are somewhat obsessed with seeing justice being served, right? Which is why there has never been a lack of courtroom dramas and reality shows like The People's Court, or Judge Judy, or Judge Mathis, or Hot Bench, or fill in the blank with your favorite courtroom show. I was surprised as I was getting ready for this morning, I was surprised to learn that dramatized readings of courtroom trials and hearings were actually first broadcast as popular radio shows in the mid-1930s. And then with the rise of television, courtroom programs became even more popular and continue to be a staple of TV programming today. Their lasting popularity is testament to our obsession with seeing justice being served. The fact that we're entertained by watching people accuse others and defend themselves reveals our concern with truth. Right? and seeing that the boundaries of what's right are intact and maintained. So in this context, this courtroom context, not bearing false witness against one's neighbor means being careful with your accusations and honest in your testimony within a court of law. Put another way, this commandment is an injunction to not abuse the legal system for personal gain. It may not be a perfect system. No judicial system will ever be perfect as long as humans are in control of it. But striving to uncover the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth is a pretty good start. Because telling the truth is pretty important, especially when testifying under oath. But this commandment has a lot more to say about the power of language and the stories that we tell, not just when we are speaking under oath. And it begins with the fact that it shouldn't take being under oath for us to speak the truth. Now, if you've been here the last couple of weeks, you'll know that throughout this deep dive into the Ten Commandments, I made it a point to address the somewhat narrow interpretations that have basically reduced these holy words to a list of dusty old rules, only good for awarding gold stars for good behavior. So in all fairness, since we've done this with all the other commandments, we should probably start there. I don't know about you, but I grew up learning this word was about not lying, not telling falsehoods, which is actually a pretty good interpretation. The only thing I would add or change is to note that we sometimes don't fully comprehend or understand the damage that lying can do. We don't realize how lying frays the social fabric that holds us together until it is too late. You see, we tell stories all of the time. We can't help it. We are story people. This is how we make sense of our lives. We tell stories about ourselves and stories about other people and about the world that we live in. We inhabit the stories we tell. And the stories we tell are a mix of fact, things we think are fact, opinions, perspectives, feelings, omissions, and lies of every shape and size. This is how we create our reality. We create our reality through the stories we tell. And normally, our subtle omissions and little lies aren't a problem. Sometimes they smooth out our social interactions. They don't become a problem until we get carried away and start living in a lie as if it were the truth. See, building our reality around a lie or series of lies cuts us off from one another, and it prevents us from living into the fullness of life that God desires for us. And the solution seems simple, doesn't it? Just don't lie. Easy enough. But the danger of lies is that they prey on our fears. And they give us simple solutions to complex problems. It's easy to fall for a lie because it provides an easy way to shore up the boundaries of our rights and blame others for any breakdown in the system. Easy to fall into lies. Drawing on the work of Jacques Ellul, a prolific writer and notable 20th century philosopher, one commentator on this commandment remarked that the major pertinence of the prohibition in our society is the collapse of truth into propaganda in the service of an ideology. The commentator goes on to say that this is public versions of truth are not committed to a portrayal of reality, but to a rendering that serves a partisan interest. In other words, this commandment is an injunction against creating a false sense of reality to further one's own agenda. I almost chose a different quiet meditation for us this morning. Instead, I went with the words of Plato because I did not want to give Hitler top billing on our worship bulletin. But he has a good line that shows us the danger of falling into lies. An often paraphrased line from his manifesto clearly articulates the danger of how a lie can become a reality. He wrote, "If you tell a big enough lie and tell it frequently enough, it will be believed." If you tell a big enough lie and tell it frequently enough, it will be believed. And that is dangerous. It's easy to get caught up in propaganda and that preys on our fears. It's easy to fall for a lie rather than to face the truth and stand for what is real. The stories we tell, the stories we believe, and the stories we repeat create our reality. So it is important, it is imperative that we start telling and believing and repeating the right stories. The stories that enable and empower us and others to be God's people in the world. And if there is any doubt what that story is, we can always go back to how God introduced these holy words in the beginning. God said, "I am the Holy One, the one who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage." This is the one who is giving the people these words. The story that we are called to live out of is one of liberation and deliverance. It is one of love and concern for the oppressed. As we heard from our gospel reading a little earlier, God's chosen one doesn't peddle in lies. Jesus said lies are the native tongue of the devil. The evil one is the source of all lies. Instead, Jesus, the chosen one, was about feeding the hungry and healing the sick, setting prisoners free, restoring life and hope to the brokenhearted, and rebuking those who cloak their disdain for others in sanctimonious false speech. So the question this commandment asks of us is, what stories do you believe? What stories do you tell others? What stories do you live out in your life? Last week, many of you may have heard this, but last week the New York Times caused a little bit of a stir when it dedicated the entire issue of its weekly magazine to a thing called the 1619 Project. You might have heard about this. But for those of you who haven't, the 1619 Project was born from the desire to mark the 400th anniversary of when the first slave ship landed in America this week. And this issue, dedicated to the 1916 Project, is a re-examination of the legacy of slavery in America. So it obviously caused a stir. The first edition of the project was comprised of 10 essays, a photo essay, and a collection of poetry and fiction pieces by black artists, writers, academics, and journalists. Because you see, one way to tell the story of how our country was founded is by saying how brave Europeans came and tamed the frontier, how they built a new world by the sweat of their brows, and would later throw off the tyranny of a king who tried to exercise control from half a world away. That is one way to tell the story. But it's not the complete story. It's not the whole truth. It's a whitewashed and oversimplified version that ignores the centuries of abuse leveled at Native people, and it overlooks the fact that this scrappy colony turned world power wouldn't have been so successful had it not been for the labor of thousands upon thousands of enslaved people. It's about truth-telling. That's the story the 1619 Project seeks to tell. Created to commemorate the 400th anniversary of the first slaves arriving in America, the project takes a hard look at our history and tells the truth about how our country was born. I've been digesting it slowly over this past week, so I've only read about half of it. But if you have read it and would like to have a conversation about it, I would love to get together and talk about it with you. But as I have been reading it, in addition to the big picture themes, I was struck by how much impact a simple word change can have. How one writer often refers to plantations as work camps. And that simple word change conjures up two very different images, right? It tells the whole truth. Not bearing false witness is as much about our past as it is about our present and our future. Lies may seem appealing because they provide temporary relief from bearing the weight of who we are and the pain that we have caused others. The pain that we are capable of causing others. But the good news is that God says, I know a different way. That I am the way, the truth, and the life. And committing ourselves to the way of Christ and the wisdom of Sophia won't completely protect us from the lives of the world, but it is a pretty good start. It's a pretty good start to tell the truth. And beyond that, a second step would be to immerse ourselves in the story of God's love and ongoing revelation. To be people of God's story. So, despite what you may think, I don't have us recite the Ten Commandments every week for my own amusement. As much as I enjoy hearing you recite the Ten Commandments, it is not for me that I do this. My hope and my prayer is that by remembering these holy words, that we all will take them to heart and to live them out in our lives. that we might start telling the truth and living into God's story for us. So, with that, I hope you didn't think I was going to let you get away this week without reciting the Ten Commandments. So let us remind ourselves of God's holy words for us. Number 1, no other gods before me. Number 2, no graven images. Number 3, no taking God's name in vain. Be careful how you use God's name. Number 4, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Number 5, honor thy father and thy mother. That's a popular one. You guys all know that one. Yeah. Number 6, thou shalt not kill. Number 7, no adultery. Number 8, thou shalt not steal. Now, knowing these words, remembering these words, may we take them to heart. So, people of God, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Amen.